with Sister Jean from the Franciscan Sisters of Mary leading us in prayer.
On a beautiful night like this, here you are. That's just fantastic. So maybe we can all just kind of relax into the moment a little bit. Go to that place in your inside of you, which is your deepest place. And so we pray. Good and gracious God, you hold all of your creation, the stars and the planets, the mountains and the rivers, the trees and the crickets, giraffes and rabbits, and each one of us alive in your love. You give us the power to come together to secure the good and well-being of all whom you love. All of your creation is precious to you. So we pause tonight in your powerful presence and call your spirit of wisdom and understanding to fill us and guide us toward what is good and life-giving and compassionate for one another and for generations to come. We ask your guidance and grace that what is just and life-giving be done for all the communities actually and potentially impacted by what is happening here at West Lake. We ask in confidence, give us what we truly need as individuals, as families, and as communities. We thank you for the grace you pour out on us. We thank you for the kindness that we experience from one another, the support and the encouragement. We thank you that we can look back over the past many months and see all that we have accomplished working together. We thank you for the persistence and the commitment of those who have been in this struggle for the well-being of the people of the St. Charles, St. Louis region for the long haul. They are our heroes and our mentors. We pray your guidance and your blessing on our political leaders, that they may be courageous in our names. May they rise to the challenge and expedite just and life-giving decisions about West Lake, decisions both for the immediate and for the long term. And we confidently raise our hearts to you once again in hope that your life-giving spirit will teach us all that we must learn to be good stewards of our regional home and good neighbors to one another. For this we pray. Amen.
Okay, thank you all again for coming tonight to our monthly meeting, and thanks again to the operating engineers for donating their hall to us to meet each month. If we have any elected officials or representatives for elected officials tonight, I'd like you to stand and state your name and office. I will start first. Ferd Fetch was here earlier tonight from Bridgeton City Council. He came in to ask if we needed anything tonight. He had to go to a Alzheimer's support group. So.
Randy Hine, Bridgeton, Councilman, Ward 3. Thank you for being here. Councilman Bob Patel,
Okay, so the rest of them, obviously, there are a lot of elected officials are having fundraisers tonight. This is a bit of a political time of year this season, so I think a lot of them, that's where they are tonight. Right now, we are up to 3,300, almost 3,400 people on our West Lake Facebook page. Please continue to direct others to our Facebook page and to become educated and updated. This is where you're going to get last minute information. Do we have anybody here for the first time tonight? Yay, thank you for coming. My name is Beth Strohmeyer. Tonight we will be hearing from Ed Smith from the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, Deb Disser, and myself. Karen Nickel and Dawn Chapman are not here this evening. As the moms, we were given a scholarship to attend Bill Otto's fundraising event this evening, where they will be given an opportunity to talk with Governor Jay Nixon regarding West Lake. They will also be thanking the governor for his veto of the Schaefer Amendment on Senate Bill 731. The Schaefer Amendment was added by a rural elected official out of St. Louis County. The amendment would diminish rights of property owners under current law to hold someone accountable for actions that reduce property values and create hazards to health, safety, and environment. And that was vetoed. So please remember to keep filling out the odor report, which can be easily accessed either by our website or our Facebook page. If you do not have a computer access, please call the DNR to report it. It's very important. And that's all I have for updates. And next is Ed, our MC.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Smith. I work for the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. We're spending a lot of time on the West Lake Landfill lately. And since we do have a few new folks in the room today, just a quick nutshell history on how we got to where we're at. 1942, St. Louis Mountain Rock Chemical Works agreed with had an agreement with the Manhattan Project to purify uranium for nuclear weapons in downtown St. Louis. They were successful, and later that year, the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction took place under the Stag football field at the University of Chicago. There was a lot of extras. This was a first of its kind event. It's done in secrecy. The purification process was not as modern as it is now, so there was a lot of waste material through the purification process. A lot of that was moved out to the St. Louis airport. It was very rural at the time. North County had yet to be developed. And a lot of that waste radioactive material was stored along Coldwater Creek by the airport. In the late 60s, the federal government had owned that radioactive material, sold it to a for-profit corporation, and it changed hands a couple times. And eventually, a lot of that radioactive material from the airport was moved to Laddie Avenue, just north of the airport in Hazelwood, where a corporation called the Cotter Company was drying it out. It was wet. They were drying it out because it was cheaper to ship by rail out to Colorado, where they were headquartered. 1973, the Cotter Corporation was told to clean up the Laddie Avenue site. It mixed roughly 8,700 tons of this product called leached barium sulfate that included 7 tons of uranium, with the top 12 to 18 inches of dirt at Laddie Avenue, which had a bunch of different piles of radioactive material on it as well. That was scooped up, totaling about 46,000 tons worth, and dumped at the West Lake Landfill in 1973, before modern landfill regulations and an unlined portion of the landfill. 1974, that radioactive part, it's actually two parts, we'll get to that, was shut down, put off limits. 1990, well in the 80s, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was in charge of the site, and in 1990, the Department of Energy declined to include it in what's called the formerly utilized Sites Remedial Action Program. Then, after the DOE passed it over, it would have been included with all these other sites in St. Louis that have radioactive waste, but because the DOE did not include it, it became a Superfund site under the EPA in 1990. In 2008, fast forward a little, the EPA made a decision to cap and leave the radioactive material where it is now. That was their record of decision through a bunch of studies and input from the community. The city of Bridgeton, I believe, called for the removal of the radioactive waste through resolutions. In 2010, after a lot of public concern, the EPA decided to take a second look at that decision. That process is ongoing. The EPA is still trying to figure out what it's going to do with the radioactive material. In 2010 as well, the smoldering fire in the South Quarry just right over the street from us began smoldering. It was quietly reported to the state of Missouri. 2012, most of the rest of us figured out what was going on when the odors became more than normally tolerable. And then the Attorney General stepped in, sued Republic Services for breaking Missouri's environmental laws. They've gone through several different negotiation processes, and they've gotten to the point where they've capped and are monitoring the South Quarry, they're capping, monitoring the North Quarry, and the EPA is overseeing the creation of what's called an isolation barrier, trying to keep the smoldering fire from hitting the radioactive waste. And there have been a lot of issues associated with that we'll get into. Just a few things again on this veto. The governor actually pointed out a hypothetical situation in his veto where there's say in St. Louis County, there's a group of residents trying to bring statutory nuisance action against the owner of a landfill that is contaminating nearby properties. Basically what the governor is saying here is that if the owner of that nuisance is in good faith compliance with the EPA, the Attorney General, or the Department of Natural Resources, all three agencies which are currently involved at the site over here, that property owners would not be able to bring a nuisance suit against the owner of said nuisance. So the governor vetoed that. It did pass in the legislative session with a large majority, and then there's what they call a veto session in September. I believe it begins on the 10th, where the state legislature gets an opportunity to override vetoes the governor has, to override the governor's vetoes of laws passed in the General Assembly. This is the DNR rendering of the landfill. Just have a wait, there it is. This is the South Quarry. This is the neck of the landfill right here. This area is proposed isolation barrier, and this is one of the two areas contaminated with radioactivity. This is OU1, Area 1, one of the two sections the EPA is in charge of. This is the other section right here. And this section over here, OU1, Area 2, actually has more, it's more radioactive, and there's more volume of radioactivity actually over here than there is over here. Both sites are radioactive though. The EPA is in charge of those purple spots. The state of Missouri, the Department of Natural Resources, is in charge of the rest of the landfill, making things a little difficult regarding communication. This is an older rendering of where Republic Services and the EPA previously thought the radioactivity was contained in. So they thought it was predominantly against St. Charles Rock Road and kind of this inside, there's a street right here that goes into the landfill. The isolation barrier, again, is being done right about here, which is where EPA and Republic Services thought there was no radioactive material. This is, again, a more detailed map of the landfill on its side. There's a lot of effort right now to stop the smoldering fire in the South Quarry, which is here, from moving north into the North Quarry, which is right here. You can see the radioactive material and OU1, Area 1's over there. It's about 1,000 feet, 1,300 feet from here to there. So the state of Missouri's Department of Natural Resources is in charge of, or overseeing, is the lead regulatory agency, I guess would be the best way to say that, of the smoldering fire. They retained about 2 years ago a landfill fire expert by the name of Todd Valhammer. There's not too many landfill fire experts out there, and I've been doing my homework a bunch on these things since this started. This was a memo prepared by Todd Valhammer for the Department of Natural Resources, and it was published or sent to them on June 15th, 2014, so it's still pretty relevant. And what he is concerned about is that over time, that smoldering landfill, it started about 80, 90, 100 plus feet deep. Well, it's been eating up the fuel, and so if you put briquettes in your charcoal pit, they're eventually going to turn into ash. And that's kind of what's been happening over here at the landfill. So when it creates this empty space, the landfill mass on top of it sinks down into that space. So what we've been seeing is a significant amount of slumping in the landfill, and that's been decreasing the space between the smoldering fire and the surface. And Todd Thalhammer brings up some concerns that overall the subsurface fire smoldering event continues to expand throughout the South Quarry and possibly into the neck of the landfill. We've been seeing some of the highest temperatures to date in the neck. The memo goes on, and this is on the Department of Natural Resources website. You can get all of this there. They do a very great job of keeping it updated. So one might conclude that subsurface smoldering fire event is past the line of gas interceptor wells. The gas interceptor wells are what are trying to keep that smoldering fire to the south. He says more information is needed. But you're starting to see the landfill fire consultant for DNR become a little more concerned about what he calls daylighting, the smoldering fire becoming a surface fire. These are gas extraction wells, gas interceptor wells, and some other wells where oxygen in the landfill has been above 5%. I believe they're trying to keep it below 1%. Oxygen fuels fires, so they're trying to keep the oxygen out. Most of these are in the South Quarry. The temperature concerns, there's a few gas extraction wells in the middle of the North Quarry, I'll show you on a map, that have been slightly over 131 degrees. 131 degrees is a temperature set by the federal government where if you start to see a landfill move above that, you should start to pay attention with a little more detail what's happening because you might have the beginnings of a smoldering fire. And then he also goes on to have some concerns about the temperature monitoring probes and some of these temperatures. TMP9 was roughly 200 degrees, about 20 feet in elevation. So that concern about the fire daylighting or becoming a surface fire is what he's talking about there. This is the standard that we just wanted that Todd Valhammer referenced. Again, this was taken from the EPA's website. It talks about that 131 degrees or above, or the landfill should be below that. We're going to follow up with DNR and find out if they have given Republic Services permission to operate the landfill above that temperature. We don't know the answer to that right now. This is the North Quarry. So if you remember those original maps, this is the radioactive material will be about right here. The smoldering landfill fires down here to your south. This is your neck of the landfill right here. You can start to see the colors get a little more colorful right here. Purple means, this light purple means below 131 degrees. That dark blue right here, and actually one up there. These gas extraction wells have been consistently in this 130, 140 degree temperature range. At a few points last summer even, I think it was gas extraction well 54, 55 was getting above 150 degrees. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on. And again, these are all on the DNR's website. This is what the South Quarry looks like. So you can see how colorful it is. That's where the current smoldering fire is taking place and the cause of a lot of the odors. So something that's happened recently that is a good thing is there are small victories throughout this, and that means getting the federal government and different agencies involved to look over what's happening at the site. And what the good news here is that the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, it's housed within the Centers for Disease Control, performed what they call a health hazard evaluation for the International Association of Firefighters. You can find the report on our website. A few of the highlights are here. This is the review of NIOSH from the Centers for Disease Control did. The waste of the landfill has been poorly defined. Components being used to manage the smoldering landfill can become compromised due to the smoldering fire. When that smoldering fire, as I said, was sinking, the landfill infrastructure moves and these gas extraction wells move with it, and sometimes there are some issues. Just wanted to say Bill Ray's here from County Executive Dooley's office. We were introducing elected officials earlier, so there's Bill Ray. They agreed with the conclusions of groups like the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, the EPA's Office of Research and Development, that oh, I messed up that part. They do believe that radioactivity could become airborne or get into the leachate into the groundwater if the smoldering fire were to encounter the radioactive material. But they also, it's sometimes what they don't say. So what's in red is my editorialization of this NIOSH report. It says radioactively impacted material is believed to be limited to OU1. This is one of the concerns that we've consistently had. The testing at the landfill has not been properly done to find out exactly where all the radioactivity is located. So, you know, I think you can read a little between the lines in that comment. Another thing is that the Department of Health and Senior Services here in Missouri is monitoring for short-term health effects. But again, it's what they don't say. There's no mention of long-term health impacts. So these are things that our organization is trying to follow up on with the appropriate agencies. Carbon monoxide in the gas extraction wells is so concentrated that if exposed to it, you can have immediate heart or health problems. They get into risks for first responders. A lot of this was, this survey was initiated because of the surface fire from February, earlier this year. If everybody remembers that, there was a big plume of smoke that came from the South Quarry. There was, I believe it was, a methane pipe broke. Some of the landfill gas equipment was compromised. There was a surface fire that was put out. But that helped trigger, that actually led to, you know, how does the emergency response actually work between our public services, our first responders, and so forth. And there were some holes in that response that NIOSH points out. So they do talk about the risks to the firefighters. They do say the incident management plan did not work. It's my understanding that the Department of Natural Resources just posted a new incident management plan on its website. I'm interested in the response of that plan from our first responders and others. I'm not an emergency responder, nor am I an expert on that. And then this is what I got ahead of myself with earlier, the potential for radiological contaminants to become airborne, either through combustion of landfill waste and so forth. They're concerned that that is a possibility as well. So the fact that if this were to happen, you have now several federal agencies saying that you have a real risk. And that real risk so far has not been properly addressed by EPA Region 7. They're working on it. We haven't seen the EPA Region 7's response to a lot of these fire reports. We're trying again to try and get some clarity on this for everyone. NIOSH suggested the fire department actions, suggestions for fire department actions in response to the smoldering surface fire. Oh, I don't know. Sorry. So the isolation barrier. The isolation barrier was a part of the negotiation agreements between the Attorney General and Republic Services. The Attorney General doing what he could because the state of Missouri is only in charge of so much of that landfill. The federal government is in charge of the radioactive material. So the Attorney General can't say, Republic Services, you need to get the radioactive waste out. That's the smartest thing to do. There's a smoldering fire 1,000 feet away. The AG does not have that latitude. So doing what he could do, given the situation, they came up with a contingency plan with Republic Services, including an isolation barrier to try and stop the smoldering fire from progressing towards the radioactive material. So this is a little update on that. The EPA in the fall agreed to take over the isolation barrier. Republic Services, during the negotiations with the state of Missouri, proposed that this barrier actually be located within the boundary that the EPA is in charge of at the landfill. For somewhat legitimate reasons, if you were to build an isolation barrier where the state of Missouri is in charge of, it goes down about 200 feet. Just on the other side of the fence, it's about 40 feet. Whether or not an isolation barrier is where we should be spending our time, money, and effort, I think is up for debate. So anyway, EPA is moving forward with the isolation barrier, and let's see here. That's the tentative agreement for the isolation barrier. So the EPA, Republic Services, their contractor, they're the ones writing the plans. The EPA is reviewing the plans, commenting on them along with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The EPA last week, I believe, tentatively, or maybe it was this week, tentatively approved the what's called the pre-construction work plan for the isolation barrier, regardless of what the design is, which that stuff hasn't been made public. There are certain activities like vegetation clearing, bird mitigation. The reason that landfill shut down is because the airport expanded. So the airport has a negative easement, I believe, on the property, and they have to be involved legally. Don't want a Hudson River on the Missouri. So they're worried about the big seagulls and such coming when this is dug open. So there are certain things that could be done sooner than later. That stuff has so far been, that pre-construction work plan has been approved by EPA. The Department of Natural Resources provided comments. DNR, just like last summer when DNR was negotiating with Republic Services on these contingency planning, does a very great job of posting their records on the DNR website. So DNR posted its comments on the isolation barrier to its website. EPA nor Republic Services have, one thing that we also found out is because the DNR is not in charge of the isolation barrier, is that EPA Region 7 and Republic Services do not actually have to abide by, follow, incorporate, respond to any of DNR's concerns. So this is the EPA's approval letter. Even though we found out it was approved July 15th, EPA sent it out July 1st. It was conditional on two things. EPA requested certain information about background values. I'm assuming they're talking about radioactivity. And then you can see USACE comment number 6, that's the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Requested change was made on page 9 of the work plan, but not in table 1. Table 1 must be updated. So here's the problem, here's the frustration at least. It's a fixable one, is that we don't know what the comments are right now. Just as DNR has been doing a good job of posting its comments on what's happening in a very transparent manner, EPA Region 7 has been reluctant to post its comments on the isolation barrier on its West Lake Landfill website. This is something that at the May community meeting, people signed a letter to EPA Region 7. It was sent to them asking EPA to put these types of records online so people could see it. It's like getting half a story. This is EPA signaling to Republic Services that DNR's comments have been addressed. Some of DNR's comments have been addressed here, so basically they don't need to worry if it's not obligatory. Well, we don't even know which of DNR's comments have been addressed because we don't know what EPA's comments are. We don't know what the Corps of Engineers' comments are. So my organization, Missouri Coalition for the Environment, we submitted a Freedom of Information Act request on July 3rd. It should be back to us pretty soon. But one thing I would urge you all to do is there is another letter here. There's actually 3. But one of them is going to be going to EPA, and it's to ask EPA if it can send documents to Republic Services on the isolation barrier, why can't it post those documents on its website? Especially if it's going to approve of those documents, but we have to go through a bunch of hoops just to get these when they're going to become publicly available. Do it sooner than later. Because this is a removal action under the EPA, you all, the Missouri Coalition for the Environment and the Department of Natural Resources literally do not have a way to influence any of the decision-making of what happens on this isolation barrier. These are negotiations between the Corps of Engineers, EPA, and Republic Services. So in the interest of transparency, we're asking EPA to throw a little sunshine on the process. There are a lot of people who are interested in what's happening here. You guys don't come out here just to socialize. You're out here to get information, and we're trying to do that for you. So that's why we've got the Freedom of Information Act request, and we've got a lot of other ones in too. So these are the DNR's comments on the isolation barrier. These are the only ones that we are aware of that have come from a government agency. So the one thing that they would like to see is slope stability for worker safety. Some of the concerns that NIOSH addressed for the first responders is to stick to roads that have been deemed safe. Don't go anywhere that hasn't been secured. Again, there's a lot of sinking and slumping happening here. It's like walking around a field of sinkholes if you're not careful. Where's the isolation barrier going to go? This is still something that has not been identified. It's been about 8 months since EPA Region 7 and Republic Services started trying to identify an isolation barrier free of radioactivity, and that has not been done yet. Relocating the waste, some things that DNR is concerned about is that because they're going to be moving around waste within the landfill, that Republic Services needs a permit. They need approval to do this. In the pre-construction work plan, there was not a request to DNR, plans to request a permit from the Department of Natural Resources. And DNR actually says that there are no sizable areas without radioactively impacted material that exist in Area 1 to deposit excavated wastes. Republic Services plans on moving some of the excavated wastes for the isolation barrier within Area 1, and DNR is saying that's not a good idea. Oxygen intrusion. This is something that should be a concern. Said that there is a possibility once you start digging to introduce oxygen. We know that oxygen fuels fires. But so far, that's still about 1,000 feet away from what we gather. Construction will exacerbate odors, soil erosion, and exposure of solid waste to the ambient air. Must monitor the leachate stormwater during construction. Leachate is juices created in the landfill. If they're going to be exposing a lot of that material, if it rains, you need to worry about that rainwater and where it's going as well. And there is a leachate problem over there. They're still removing about 250,000 gallons of leachate. It's very nasty sludge a week. Does not discuss non-radioactive hazards in the work plan, something that the DNR is concerned about, your asbestos, arsenic, lead, uranium. Uranium is a heavy metal, not as a radioactive isotope. More materials may be encountered if construction extends into the North Quarry. The reason DNR is concerned about it extending into the North Quarry is because, it's my understanding, they're progressively moving south because they still haven't found that unimpacted line for the isolation barrier. So what happens if that work moves into the North Quarry? What about its security? Some things DNR is concerned about. Equipment contamination. What happens to equipment if it becomes radioactive in the process? I imagine that will be addressed in the work plan, but because we don't have the responses to EPA or DNR, or excuse me, the Corps of Engineers, and Republic Services is not required to respond to DNR's comments, we'll work on trying to get these questions answered from EPA Region 7. So again, DNR is concerned about the North Quarry and what sort of impacts the work being done on the isolation barrier will have on that. This is a very important part. The work plan must address testing to confirm the North Quarry does not have radioactively impacted material. This has been a long-standing concern of ours. We've asked the EPA several times, are you guys in charge of the radioactive wastes? Yes, we are. What if the radioactive wastes are outside of the boundaries? Well, then we own them. Are you going to test outside of the boundaries? No, we've done a good job. Well, they haven't done a good job. And that's been proven by the fact that they keep finding new radioactive material where they had not previously identified it. And I think that I am finished. Sorry for sucking up so much oxygen.
Talking about the new community monitor equipment that we have finally gone live on. And we're going to be passing out flyers if you don't have them. Okay. The monitors that you see up here were donated by Steve Stenger and Representative Bill Otto. To 2 computer laptops that were donated to us by the operating engineers, and one by Jerry Germer. So thank you both. So what the monitors are hooked up to is NetC, and this is the website. And when you want to access it, you have to click on this icon up here. And this is what it shows for the world on how many monitors are out there in the world. And you can click on any of those to get a reading. The handout you have tells you about what NetC maps are about and how to read what is out there. And on the one page side that you have these boxes that have these CPMs on here. This is the one up in Spanish Village, and this will be the one over in the St. Charles area. And this one over here, sorry for the shaking, is EPA's. And what they show is the average high, low, and the average medium after 3 months count. So you can see what the changes are. And then this is where they are located. You can see in the St. Louis area. And this is what you will actually see when you go in and check out first. The one up here, this is the Spanish Village one, and this is EPA's. We are more busy because we are monitoring gamma, alpha, beta, and gamma signals, and EPA is only monitoring gamma. And that is what the rest of the monitors around the world usually are showing as gamma only. You will see different spikes. For instance, this spike right about here, that was when we had a rainstorm at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can see it spiked up because rain will hold down the radium underground, and then about 20 minutes later we saw the same spike downtown at the EPA site. So that is how you go on, and the sheets that you guys are all handed out will tell you the login information. Let me go back to that page. The login ID is just Mom's STL, and the password is FoosRap. And if anybody has any questions, they can get on our Facebook page and ask us, or on our website. And if there's any questions, I can answer them later. Thank you.
Okay. Ordinary citizens using tools of dignity, self-respect, common sense, and perseverance can influence solutions to important problems in our society. That was a quote from a mom, a housewife, an environmental activist whose work spans over 35 years. Lois Gibbs has been recognized extensively for her critical role in the grassroots environmental health movement. Us moms, Dawn, Karen, Debbie, and myself, feel a very strong connection to Lois Gibbs. Her journey was a lot like our present path. In the 1970s, she was a housewife who lived in a neighborhood called Love Canal, 5 miles upstream from Niagara Falls, New York. With a young child whose elementary school was built on top of a toxic chemical dump site. Desperate to do something about it, she organized her neighbors, called loudly on her elected officials, learned the science, and even held 2 EPA officials hostage until the state agreed to move all residents out of the area. Lois has been shot at, insulted, threatened, and harassed. She still carried on to fight for her community. She still fights today. Lois created the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice in 1981. Here is a short video of Lois Marie Gibbs, a fighter, an environmental activist, and most of all, a mom.
I was sort of a regular housewife buying the American dream in 1978. I moved into this lovely home in Niagara Falls. It wasn't a spectacular home. It was a ranch, 3-bedroom ranch with a finished basement, a short distance from the Niagara River. I mean, huge Niagara River, 5 miles upstream of Niagara Falls. It had 2 elementary schools. It had churches. It had a convenience store. It was a perfect neighborhood. And so I moved in there with my husband and my 1-year-old child, thinking I've just made the American dream at 24 years of age. I mean, my parents waited so long, very happy. And then after living there for a while, Michael got really sick. Michael was healthy when he moved in. He developed liver problems, urinary tract disorder, which required 2 operations to correct. He developed asthma, epilepsy. I mean, it was just one thing after the other. And I did not know about Love Canal. Nobody told me when I bought that ideal home in the ideal community that there was 20,000 tons of chemicals underneath the school that my son would eventually be attending. And so Michael got sick and sicker, and I kept taking him to the doctor and asking the pediatrician, and he had no clue. He's like, God gave you this child because you're one of these moms that he knows will take care of him. It's like, no. God gave me a healthy child. Something is making him sick. It wasn't until I picked up the newspaper one day, and there was a series on hazardous waste done by Michael Brown in the Niagara Falls Gazette, and I looked at it, and it talked about 20,000 tons of chemicals underneath the 99th Street School. and looking out into the homes. And they had a list of all these different chemicals in there, and so I took it over to my brother-in-law, who worked at SUNY Buffalo, the university there. He's a biologist. And I said, wait, what are these chemicals? They say toxic chemical. I don't know what that means. And he said, well, let me see, this one will kill about 1 million brain cells when you take one deep breath. And he went through this whole list, and I'm like, Wayne, Michael's really sick. Do you think these chemicals and him playing on the playground every day, even though he wasn't yet in school, could be making him sick? And he said, I have no doubt. And so I went to the school board and said, can you move Michael out of the school? By then he was in kindergarten, 1978. This is when the article ran. And they said, no, we cannot, because if we move Michael Gibbs because of the potential threat, we have to move all 407 children. And I'm like, yeah, you need to move all 407 children. We're not going to do that. We're not closing a school because of one irate, hysterical housewife. And I went home saying, oh my goodness, this is just unbelievable. And then I started to go door to door to my neighbors and said what I found. The city government was not moving. The county government shut the door in my face. The state government shut the door in my face. And obviously the school board, Dr. Long, who was the superintendent of schools at the time, slammed the door in my face. And so I did a petition and went door to door and said, look, you know, do you have problems with your kids? I think it's related to the school. But we never did have, at the onset of discovery of the problem, we never really understood the dimensions of what was happening at Love Canal. We truly believed that our children were getting sick as a result of playing on the playground or as a result of going to school there and playing on the playground. We didn't know it really was traveling into our homes and into our backyards and into our bodies in that way. The area where Love Canal was a new neighborhood. You know, those homes were fairly new, so there was a lot of land where you could have built a school. You didn't need to build it there. It wasn't like you're in the South Bronx or something like that where you have a finite amount of property available. There was plenty of property available, and they chose that, and it was a dollar deal. Well, they knew that the property was contaminated. The school board knew that, and the city knew that. They knew that there was industrial waste buried there because there was a waiver that said in the deed, if anyone gets sick or harmed from our industrial waste, we will not be responsible. So they knew that. Whether they understood the depth of that, because we're really talking 1950 here, so it was a different world and a different understanding, is unclear. Excuse me. But one thing that did happen is when it went to the Supreme Court, when the government tried to get their money back for the testing, the cleanup, the relocation of the Love Canal families, the New York Supreme Court decided that Occidental Petroleum, in fact, did no more, did not disclose that information to the school board, not making the school board necessarily innocent, but less guilty than a lot of people think. And so they were held responsible for Love Canal, Occidental Petroleum, to the tune of $197 million. Huge price tag. Love Canal is named after Mr. William T. Love. It's really quite a unique story. Mr. Love was an entrepreneur, and what he wanted to do was connect the upper and lower Niagara River through this canal. And what he essentially wanted to do was move the mighty Niagara Falls, as we call it locally, onto his property. And in doing so, he could harness the dropping of water and be a zillionaire because he would have this huge energy that he could sell to everybody. Unfortunately, he had part of the canal dug at both ends, and then money fell away, the Depression set in, and he never completed his project. But, you know, he was an interesting fella to think, oh, I'm just going to move the seventh wonder of the world over on my property, you know, really take all of the energy there and all of the money, and, you know, I could really be a good businessman. And it was really, there's some old photos of Mr. Love and some of his friends and colleagues, I guess, investors, actually digging, you know, with a shovel, sort of the ceremonial dig, and they had these big old top hats on and these old suits, and it's really very cool. But that's how it got its name. I think because it was named Love Canal and because we had Hooker Chemical Corporation, it helped us to get a lot of media attention because people would giggle about all of these associated names, so it added a little play to the story. And the canal was used for many, many years before a dump as a recreation area. People would swim, people would fish. It's actually connected to the Niagara River back then. So as the river rose, so did the canal, and it was fresh water, and it was quite lovely. What Occidental Petroleum Hooker did is they bought that land because it went up on auction because nobody was paying taxes on it. They bought the land, they dammed off the place where it met the Niagara River. They pumped the water out of it in different they dammed it off in different sections. And each section they pumped the water out, and then they backfilled it with chemicals. And then they would move to another section and they would do the same thing. Our understanding is the city of Niagara Falls also buried garbage in there. So sanitary landfill was a part of that. And we also understand that the Army, the military I guess, dumped some of the Manhattan Project in there and some chemical warfare products in there that Hooker Chemical was making at the time. And there's like live testimony of people saying, you know, they were the ones who dumped it. They looked like beer kegs, but they had stripes on them. We had to wear moon suits and put them in there and cover them up immediately. So what's in Love Canal, nobody really knows. We know there's over 200 chemicals that they have found, but how much of the Manhattan Project, how much chemical warfare stuff, what kind of exotic chemicals are there, is really, no one really has a real good handle on. And the other thing that's really kind of scary is that you don't know what chemicals are there that were created from the chemicals that were buried there. So, you know, when they mix all up, then what do we have? And what does that mean? And it's that reason that they decided from the beginning not to dig Love Canal up and do something with it, but rather leave it in place and see if they can contain it. I was actually shocked when I went door to door and started talking to people and asking them, do you have this problem? Do you have that problem? What's going on? We had 56% of our children, this is a 5-year period, so we didn't go all the way back, but 5-year period, 56% of our children were born with birth defects. 3 ears, double rows of teeth, extra fingers, extra toes, or mentally retarded. There were these 3 women who lived side by side, not genetically related in any way. All 3 of them had children born with the exact same birth defect, which was the children didn't have a hole in the top of their skull when they were born, so their skulls can't grow, and obviously their brains can't grow. And they could correct it with surgery, but it was just, you know, those kind of stories when I went door to door. We had a 21-year-old who died of crib death. I don't think so. I mean, some of this stuff was just, we had a young girl who was 12 years old who had a hysterectomy due to cancer. I mean, it was just bizarre when we heard these stories, but we really looked at the health impacts we found. During that same study period, there were 22 women who were pregnant at the time of the study, and only 4 babies were born normally. The other pregnancies ended in miscarriages, stillborn babies, or birth defected children. High rate of urinary disease, I mean, the list goes on.
Okay, so that was the video of Lois Gibbs. So now when you came in and didn't know who she was, you're leaving knowing who she is and what she represents. Please join us on Saturday, August 16th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Graphic Artists and Banquet Center, Maryland Heights. Lois Gibbs is coming to St. Louis to speak to you, the community, the fighters. This is a workshop, a free workshop, for you to come and hear her story and how she and her community conquered the injustice and won. This is an RSVP-only event. We have limited seating. The sign-up will be posted on our Facebook page and website, along with the Missouri Coalition of the Environment's website, and it will be up very shortly. We will not be having our normal monthly meeting in August. I repeat, we will not be here next month due to this workshop. We really urge you and your family and friends to sign up for this special event. Knowledge is power. We as the community are starting to get national attention. People are waking up. Elected officials are waking up. You heard me talk earlier about the governor earlier, and now I just received a West Lake flyer in today's mail. I don't know if anybody else did, but it was a full, nice ad about West Lake. Westlake is being brought up regularly at fundraisers and political debates, etc. Your hard work and not taking no for an answer has made this happen. So now I'm going to let Ed come up and talk a little bit more about the workshop. Thank you.
Hello again. I don't have a whole lot more to add. I'm dyslexic today. I do not have much more to add about the workshop other than please do pay attention for the RSVP. It's going to be a Google form. We're hammering out some final details, including lunch being provided and what that looks like. So that'll be a part of the RSVP. Hopefully we'll have that out within a couple of days, if not sooner. There are some sign-up sheets in the front and in the back for Lois Gibbs. If you are not on the Coalition for the Environment's email list and you want to make sure you get that RSVP link, sign up. We have a dedicated email list just for West Lake Landfill. We won't bother you with all the other tree-hugging stuff that we do. It's pretty cool. I encourage you to look into it, though. With that, there's a few other announcements that you may have seen. The county health department is commissioning a study to look at health issues along Coldwater Creek. There's been a really great group of people who grew up along Coldwater Creek. They put together a health survey. If you've been to some of our meetings, they presented this information. They've captured some attention. Some of the parallels from that video we just watched is, I think there were 3 appendix cases on one block. These are 1 in 314,000 population kinds of cancers, and 3 of them were on one block that backed up to Coldwater Creek. There's some compelling health issues, and the stuff that contaminated Coldwater Creek, not all of it, I do believe that there's other stuff that went into that creek other than radioactivity, being that close to the airport. But that's the same radioactive material that's in the West Lake Landfill. So keep your eyes peeled about what's going to be happening with that survey. And we've got some more things for you to sign. Do appreciate your signatures. These are federally elected officials. You heard me talk about how West Lake Landfill was not included in the nuclear weapons cleanup program back in 1990 here in St. Louis. These folks can help make that happen. We do believe that the Army Corps of Engineers now, they have what's called the Formerly Utilized Sites Remedial Action Program. They're in charge of the St. Louis downtown site where this started. They're in charge of the St. Louis airport site. They're in charge of Laddie Avenue. They're not in charge of West Lake Landfill. We saw just recently at the last community advisory group meeting last month where the EPA was here talking about haul routes. That's been an issue lately between Laddie Avenue and West Lake. And someone from the Corps' office stood up and challenged a statement made by the EPA that all the haul routes belong to the Corps of Engineers, and Corps of Engineers representatives stood up in a public meeting and said that that is not true. Well, let's make it true. Let's make sure that you contact your federally elected official, have them put the Corps of Engineers food rep in charge of West Lake Landfill. They can do this. Congress has done this before on a bipartisan effort, and it'll take a bipartisan effort to do it again, and that's the cast of characters we have out there. They sent a letter. We know that they're interested in making sure that food rep's been involved. We were able to increase the pressure on them to do something. We talk to them regularly. They're still trying to figure out how to make this work and what's in the long-term best interest. But in order to try and get the ball rolling and listening to the community, they sent a letter in February to the court or to the EPA, to Administrator Brooks, Region 7, and said, please contract the St. Louis Army Corps of Engineers Foods Rep to consult with you about what happens at that landfill. The Kansas City Corps of Engineers has a contract now with EPA Region 7 for this landfill. And I guess it's my understanding that the St. Louis Corps Food Rep is talking to EPA about a contract, but I haven't seen or heard anything come of that lately. So sign the letter, that's one of them. Then we got these guys. These are, the state's in charge, the federal government's in charge, so this is Attorney General Coster and Governor Nixon. We actually have been able to thank both of these folks lately. Attorney General Coster went back to court with Republic Services, set a court date for August 2015. There are a lot of things that Republic Services has to do between now and then, including paying for 3 rounds of comprehensive air monitoring between now and August 2015. This is a very, again, small victories. That's what we've been doing here. That's actually a big victory. It's been over a year since any comprehensive air monitoring was done, and yeah, that's a big deal. And so instead of just monitoring a handful of chemicals and other things that are coming out of the landfill, the comprehensive air monitoring allows for about 187 different types of chemicals to be tested through air testing. So that's a big deal. And as we talked about earlier, the governor's veto of Senate Bill 731 was certainly welcome. That's what I just talked about. And this is Administrator Brooks. I was actually at this with him. It was a clean air health event in downtown St. Louis. And he had some very good takeaways. I listened to his speech. He told people that you are the ones that are supposed to keep his agency honest, and that he wants to keep hearing from you. Well, that's what we're here to do. That's why we've got letters. That's why we're asking you to send questions to Region 7. And that's why you're here tonight. So make sure you sign the letter to the EPA asking them to be more transparent. There's some in the back, there's some in the front. Sign that letter to Attorney General Nixon, no, former Attorney General Nixon, Attorney General Coster and Governor Nixon, and to our federally elected officials. There's some upcoming events. Chuck and Kathy, where'd they go? Can't see now. July 20th, that's the next Community Advisory Group meeting. Doug Clemens is down here in front. There's a couple other board members. What?
That's open house for the fire department.
Oh, there's an open house for the fire. You guys can read this better than I can. There's an open house, Fayetteville Fire Department. If you're able to swing by, do that. Thank them for all of their great work and trying to make sure that the landfill is as safe as possible. And getting trained on this stuff. This is a very unique situation over there, and there's a lot of unprecedented things happening. So the first responders, from what I know, have been doing a very good job. The 21st is the Community Advisory Group meeting. Same place, same time, 6:30. 23rd, prayer vigil. If you go down the St. Charles Rock Road, on the north side, there's an abandoned Phillips 66 gas station, 10 a.m. The second and fourth Wednesday of every month. So next Wednesday will be the second prayer vigil. I'm often at those and give a little update. So if you're jonesing for a landfill update, come by the prayer vigil. I'll be there. Next community meeting will be in September. As Beth said, the next August meeting will be the Lois Gibbs Love Canal and West Lake Landfill event that will substitute for this meeting. And questions and answers.
Can I ask a question? In one of your statements, as far as how deep the burning smoldering event is, did it say it's 20 feet down below the surface? Is that correct?
Yeah, that was according to temperature monitoring probe. There have been issues in the past with the reliability of those. That's why Todd said that more information is needed on some of these things. But yeah, I mean, the general concern here is that the trash mound is sinking and the fire is staying in the same area. and the concern is that it could surface.
Because you can see, I mean, it's probably like what, 75 feet since all this started, the whole trash mound. I mean, it's almost just looks like a hill now, you know, not a big giant garbage dump.
Yeah, and I don't know if the DNR is going to be at the CAG meeting on Monday. I don't know if they've been requested, but just keep reading what DNR is putting on his website about the smoldering fire. That's what I do to get the best information.
Real quick, are they repairing the cap as it sinks, or are they just letting it?
You know, I believe the answer to that is yes. The degrees of you know, what Republic Services has to report that's done versus regular operation and maintenance is somewhat murky. You know, if you just have to go out there and solder a hole or whatever, the cap poked a hole in it. Republic doesn't have to report every little itty bitty thing they do, so they're always tweaking and working around the edges, from what I understand, trying to make sure that that cap is staying intact.
If the cap tears, it's my understanding there's an accumulation of potentially toxic gases under the surface of that cap because they're being retained and trying to keep oxygen from going in and the breathing effect that they're retaining gases.
I am not, like I said, if anybody from the fire department back there wants to entertain any of these fire questions, that'd be great. You know, I do not know enough to comment on that.
I didn't hear this last question.
The question was if the cap rips, it's his understanding that there's a layer of gases immediately underneath that cap that could be a problem. I guess if somebody were in the near vicinity, if that were to be released.
I don't believe that's, I'm Ken Adel, I'm the battalion chief for A shift at Pattonville Fire. Matt Levansky unfortunately is out of town, so I'm here to try to answer some questions. He knows quite a bit more about it than I do, but, excuse me, I don't believe that that's the case. I think there's, don't hold me to this, there's constant air movement to kind of contain what goes on under there. I mean, obviously that keeps those foul odors, or supposed to keep those foul odors contained. As far as if it were to rupture, I'm not quite sure what the answer to that, but I can certainly have Matt get back with you guys, or the moms, and with a solid answer on that. I'll see what I don't want to do. Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What kind of lunch is being served at open house?
Hot dogs.
We'll actually have a lot of the hazmat equipment on display. If you guys want to see the stuff that we're going to do to kind of make sure that we're ready to respond to anything gets there. We'll have all of our equipment, even the fire stuff and everything like that, and hazmat trailers on as well.
Please understand, we show up to the firehouse every morning prepared for something to happen. Every morning I drive into work, I think that today could be a day that something's going to happen. I happen to be on the day that it happened on the 14th.
Yeah.
We're here for you guys. We are educating ourselves to the best of our ability. We're getting any information we can from many different sources. We're going to do whatever it takes to keep you safe all the time. So, yes, sir.
You guys have got a plan out. I haven't seen or heard it yet. I live up here on the village up here.
Yes.
Basically, if something were to really occur that's pretty bad, you guys realize to go in every house and make sure somebody doesn't pass out on the floor and that, aren't you?
Absolutely. And we are constantly hit up at Schnooks or anywhere. What's your evacuation plan? I have to tell you that there are so many different, it's so dynamic. We have a plan. We will deal with law enforcement and we'll pull the trigger when we deem necessary. Hopefully we never have to. But we don't have a cookie cutter plan for this day. It's all based on what we're faced with over here, weather conditions, so on and so forth. It's all in our minds. We run these different scenarios. We're constantly, we literally have a room in the firehouse that has all the maps and all the latest information on what's going on with the landfill, with what we know, what we think is the most current information. So the But yeah, we absolutely do a primary and secondary search on any type of incident like that. Okay?
We as somebody living up there, residents, should probably have a bag pack to sit by the door, that kind of thing, wouldn't be a bad idea.
That's-
Because if we go
that's your
out there, we
call.
might not be able to get back in there for a period of time.
That's quite, I don't really,
We're gonna worry about it.
we can't say that it's gonna go right towards Phoenix Village.
Right,
You know,
of course not.
Yeah,
So,
so,
depending on what's out here, we go.
I don't wanna say, oh, go in the back today, I'm not in a position. to
Oh, no,
say.
I'm not saying you go camping, I'm just saying it wouldn't be a bad idea, I just have those out there.
Yeah, we've had a person here from the Red Cross before who talked about just whether it's a landfill issue or anything else, that it's always a good idea just to have a small grab and go in the case of any type of emergency. It's always better to be prepared than not be prepared.
Please understand, on any incident, the fire department always has a plan A and a plan B, and we'll always work on a plan C. We have to, we can't rely on one plan, so, there's talk about, well, they're working on, Republic's working on their plan, the fire department's working on their plan, they're gonna get together. Anything that happens anywhere in our 28 square miles, we're gonna handle it, one way or another, so.
And actually, I just wanted to mention that at Monday night's CAG meeting, St. Louis County Emergency Management will actually be there to answer some questions about these types of things.
Was everybody able to hear Doug? At the Community Advisory Group meeting on Monday, the county emergency management will be on hand to answer questions about emergency response. So, if you're interested in that, come by. Yeah.
The leachate seepage, I remember from past meetings, you said that it was too toxic to go to MSD.
The leachate?
Yes.
Yeah, Republic Services has been working on a leachate treatment project on site. We still have some outstanding questions about leachate that we're working on, and as soon as we get answers to those questions, we'll be sure to share them, I promise.
I was wondering if that's why the MSD is building that big new place south of the casino.
I know MSD has a lot of infrastructure developments happening with some of the issues with their sewer system, so it could be unrelated. I'm not sure, but I know that they have a lot of capital flowing into improvements. Anybody else? Everybody's ready to get out and enjoy this beautiful polar vortex in the summer?
Motion
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming.